Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu Kalpa Vriksha Lakshabritesu. The first time I met him was in end of '69. And we met him simply because we had met the devotees, the first devotees who just arrived in France. And they just arrived, and 1 week after, we met them. So I say we because we were 3 French girls who at the same time, we were school friends. And at the same time, we met the devotees, and at the same time, we joined. So that's why usually I say we, because we were the 3 of us together, Mandakini, Lavati, and myself. So we went to see the devotees who had no temple or nothing at that time. They just were preaching at the American Center. And one day they told us, our spiritual master is going to be is in London. Do you like to go see him? So at that time we were planning to go to Tibet to become monks. And we thought, why not? That's a good idea. We're going to see a guru. We were going to have a Buddhist guru in Tibet, so why not try see what is a guru? So it's in that idea that we went to see him. It was not completely with the idea of becoming devotees. It was just checking out an Indian guru. And so we went to London, and it was a very, very great reception because we were the 3 first French devotees. So everybody had told Prabhupada, the 3 first French devotees are arriving. So everybody was waiting for these first French devotees. So as soon as we arrived on the day the deities were installed in London, in what was that street? No, Soho Street was much after, the one that before, it skipped my mind now. So on the first day it was just the installation of the deities. And then the next day we were all brought to Prabhupada so that he would see. So we just arrived and we immediately saw Prabhupada. And my impression at that time, because I had all these Buddhist ideas, and the idea is that the spiritual master, you just look at him, and he throws, you have some spiritual fluids, that goes from him to you, and you become spiritually enlightened. So that's what I was expecting when I saw Prabhupada. And it didn't happen. That's not the way it happened. What Prabhupada just told me, and these 2 other girls, he just said he was very happy to see us. He said it's very nice, and that it would be very good that we have very nice examples here with Jamuna, Janaki, Malati. So he talked to us in this very simple way, which was not at all what we expected. So the first connection was like that, to meeting him for the first time in his room. But then the transcendental fluid, in fact, that I was hoping to have from Prabhupada happened more in the temple room. And as Prabhupada was talking, he was of course always talking this personal philosophy. And in my mind, as he was talking, I was always thinking, yes, but, I don't accept that, I don't accept that. I was arguing with him, with what he was saying philosophically, but only thinking, And then what was very astonishing is that each next class, he would defeat all the arguments that I had in my mind the day before, And this went on and on like that for many days. So much that towards the end, I started to feel convinced that after all, maybe personalism is a higher philosophy than impersonalism. So it was not done through direct question and answers. But personally, I think that I've been convinced of personalist philosophy over impersonalist philosophy by Prabhupada directly in that way, in these first days. And the other thing that convinced me also were the kirtans and the chanting of Hare Krishna. This was, each time I was in the temple room with Prabhupada and with the kirtan, I was thinking, no, I stay here. I don't go to Tibet. I don't go to a Tibetan monastery. And then when I would leave Prabhupada's presence and the chanting's presence, I'd think again, no, what am I talking about? I'm not staying here. I'm going to be a Tibetan monk, a Buddhist monk. And this went on like that for the whole week, until at the end of the week, I was convinced that I would stay and become a devotee.
When I first met Srila Prabhupada, I had met Govinda Dasi in the morning, and the previous night I was living at my parents' house, and I had a horrendous fight with my mother. I wasn't happy working as a carpenter's apprentice for the state apprenticeship program in Hawaii. We were making forms and pouring cement and making hotels, and we had a big fight, and I told her I was going to quit my job if they didn't put me on a housing project. So she said, if you quit your job, don't come home. So the next morning I went down to the union hall, and they said, no, you need 2,000 hours of form work. And I said, well, I'm out of here. It was only about 7 in the morning, so I went downtown in Honolulu. I was waiting for the library to open. I was going to get some books on how to propagate avocados. And I was sitting on the front steps of the library, waiting for it to open, and this young lady walks past, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and a couple minutes later she came back and she said, I just had to come and talk to you. You look so miserable. And it was Govinda Dasi. And I was already a vegetarian. I was already trying to read different copies of the Bhagavad Gita, and we were reading Paramahansa Yogananda and all these different types of things. And she kept saying, we talked for several hours, and she was in town. She was doing some propaganda work for Srila Prabhupada at the newspapers and the radio stations. And she kept saying, you have to come home and meet my spiritual master. So we made arrangements to meet that afternoon after she had done her work for Srila Prabhupada. And I was going to go home and meet her spiritual master. And we met that afternoon about 4:30, and I just had a bicycle. Krishna had taken everything away from me. I didn't have a car. I was living with my parents. I just quit my job, had no money. All my friends had completely deserted me because I wasn't taking drugs or going out and partying, and I wasn't interested in the things that they were interested in anymore. So Krishna had taken everything away from me. So we met that afternoon, and I left my bike at a friend's house, and we hitchhiked from downtown Honolulu out to the North Shore, which was about 40-45 miles. And we get there and walk up into this old house where the area is called Ka'ava, and it was just an old 3-bedroom house, and they had 5 acres of land. And we get there, and she says, all right, I'm going to go see my spiritual master. I'll be right back. So about 5 minutes later, she comes back and says, all right, you can meet my spiritual master now. And she walks me right into Srila Prabhupada's room. And he's sitting there. He didn't have a shirt on. His body was very golden in color. He had a trunk, that was his desk. And practically speaking, I was just straight off the beach. I wasn't wearing a shirt either. I was wearing a crucifix. And the first thing he said to me, he said, so, what is your philosophy of life? And I started telling him all this impersonal stuff, and he listened for a few minutes, and then he started preaching Bhagavad Gita. And he had the purple Macmillan Bhagavad Gitas. And without me ever asking him a question, he was giving me all of the answers that I was trying to find that were completely puzzling my life. And it was like I felt at peace. It was just something special about all the things that he was saying that just put me completely at ease. So I stayed for 3 days. I didn't call my mother. She didn't know where I was. Stayed for 3 days, and then we went, picked up all my stuff, and moved into the temple. And we lived there. That was Prabhupada's first visit in Hawaii. He was already there for 2 weeks at the time, and he had another 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks. But we lived in the same house with Srila Prabhupada. Govinda Dasi was there, Gorsinder was there, devotee named Mahakratu, Sudama was a brahmachari. At that time, he was the one who first shaved me up. But it was such a special situation. My first service was, I washed Srila Prabhupada's clothes every morning, in the bathtub. But it was just, it was a very casual atmosphere, but at the same time, Srila Prabhupada, he was like the father directing all of the children how to be human beings.
Yeah, morning walks, it so happened that I was probably the only man wearing white. At that time I was in Mayapur, and there was all my senior godbrothers, a lot of sannyasis and GBCs, and I was in the back of the line or somewhere in the periphery of it, but kind of close to him. And one morning it got pretty interesting, and really apparently there was some controversy about a godbrother giving away his books, and devotees, I think they were kind of mad about it, and they were thinking that he wasn't doing right or something. And there was all these big issues trying to be resolved in the morning walk, and Prabhupada was very quiet, didn't really speak. And when they said, well, Prabhupada, he's giving away your books. Prabhupada said, well, as long as he pays me, that's fine. As long as he covers the cost of the book, that he can do. And so they went on, and everybody was like, there was some argument going on. I can't recall right now. There was big shots, and Prabhupada again mentioned how we have the real United Nations, and so we kept on walking, and they told Srila Prabhupada, we're going to go, we'll take you to this. There was a pandal with all the pictures from all the deities around the world. And the sun was coming up at that time, and there was 3 things he said that morning. This is the second one. He turned around and he pointed with his cane. He was like really regal too, very, that made so much sense. It was right on the spot, and he started pointing out at the trees and the scenery around that was coming out, and this hot Bengali sun, and he says, see how now the sun came out and everything is clear to see? So one day you'll see that Krishna will appear and you'll see everything clearly. And he kept on walking, and devotees wanted to ask him and wanted to get his opinion on that. He wasn't speaking too much. Then he actually, he didn't seem too happy about all the argument and didn't want to really talk. But the children saw him, and as we were walking down the hall of that pandal, the children were peeking through and calling his name, and Prabhupada would go like he was about to run after them with a cane, and chasing them and smiling. Then he turned around and smiled and says, see, all men and children make friends fast, easily.
So every day after that I was cooking. So then the next morning, Shaktimati, she, a Punjabi lady, she's a renowned cook and very fierce. She invaded the kitchen in the early hours of the morning, and she decided that she was cooking for Prabhupada for his breakfast. So I thought, okay, fair enough, she can do it. And I just left her to it. She had a whole group of brahmacharinis with her, and they cooked up huge feast. I just went to the class and the morning program. And I came back, and because Prabhupada had wanted me to bring the plates in anyway, but they cooked that much. There were 2 big silver platters loaded with different preparations. And we went in. I got one devotee to help me, Nrihari, and he was carrying one plate, I was carrying the other plate. And we went into Srila Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada's eyes just went really big. He looked at it. As I came in and put it down in front of him, he was looking and saying, "You have cooked all this?" And I said, "Oh no, Srila Prabhupada, not me." And then he said, he looked at Brahmananda, he looked over at Brahmananda and he said, "Who is this? Shakti Mati?" And they both just started laughing. You know, they started laughing like it was some sort of a joke. I didn't know what it was about, and I was just standing there hopping from one foot to another. And then Prabhupada, he just started, he took samosas and different things off, and he gave each one of us in the room. There was Chayavana, Brahmananda, myself, and Naragadev in the room, as far as I remember. And he just gave each of us, you know, a handful of prasadam. And he said, "Oh, you take this. And then you distribute the rest, and then you come back and I'll tell you what I want for breakfast." So I did that, you know, and he actually wanted fruit, local fruits. As he said, the fruits in Kenya were excellent. So that's what he wanted every day. So I was to make up his breakfast. He specifically said, "I want you to do it."
After the 5 first days of our stay there, there was supposed to be initiations. So Prabhupada told Tamal Krishna that we should be initiated. And Tamal Krishna told me that, "Prabhupada, they've been here only 5 days. We're not going to initiate them now." But Prabhupada asked that we be initiated. And so, because Tamal Krishna didn't want to, we were initiated 1 month later. But it's also significant that Prabhupada seeing us how interested we were, and chanting and dancing with so much enthusiasm and participating with enthusiasm, and maybe, as I think and you thought, maybe also reading the minds, say that we should be initiated at that moment. So that was the first connection with Prabhupada.
He said, "Your name is Balabhadra Das." Balabhadra is another name for Lord Balaram. So I guess Srila Prabhupada knew the future, because I've always been trying to be involved in agriculture and working with the plow, and so Prabhupada was foreseeing the future by giving that name.
So at that time, if Prabhupada was not directly there, you were initiated by letter, which means that we would send a letter saying we would like to be initiated. We would send beads, and we would send dakshin. And so this is also a very funny part, is that at that time the dakshins were not like now money. You know, we were all hippies with nothing, and the dakshins were whatever we could do or find, very simple things. So my dakshin, because at that time I liked very much to paint, I just painted a little picture of Krishna for Prabhupada, and this was my offering for initiation to Prabhupada. I remember Yogeshwari's dakshin was a pair of socks. But Prabhupada, he was so nice with his disciples that little picture, he hung it in his office, in his room, and the picture was there. So, and then Prabhupada would chant on our beads, and it would be sent back to us with a letter explaining that he was accepting us as disciples and giving some instructions. And the beads on which he chanted, this was the way we were initiated at that time.
My second initiation, and Hanuman Prabhu again called me on the phone and said, Srila Prabhupada is going to be in Mexico City, so let's go see him. And it was such an exciting occasion. And he says, you'll get, for some reason the devotees here in LA didn't know me, and I got forgotten always in the last in the list or whatever, and such a big temple. And so he calls me and says, no, let's go, I'll recommend you again to get second initiation. So I got a chance to get second in person, and I was again so nervous. I'd never been so close to him, and I think he even grabbed my hand to say like this, dummy, 1, 2, 3, 4. And but I wanted to give him so much, and I didn't have anything. So I went out and collected some dakshin and made some money and brought it back, and then decided I felt that it wasn't enough. And we were going to, we were going to Guatemala to a program, I think, with Hanuman. And so we went, and I bought a blanket and an onyx little box made of onyx, and a jar of honey. That was like very nice, good quality honey. And I bought it because I really wanted to see if I could please him and see him, if maybe I get to see him to eat it or taste it. So we brought it back, and it's the last day that Prabhupada's staying at the room, so the room is really buzzing with devotees coming in and out. Everyone's getting ready, they're getting his things ready to go, and Prabhupada's very relaxed. And all of a sudden the room kind of gets empty, and there's about maybe Sruti Kirta was his servant then. And again, I didn't feel like, I said, well, Prabhupada, I brought you this. I didn't say anything, I just stood there hoping that he would take the honey. And he was looking at things on his desk, and then he noticed that there was a pot of honey. And I kept thinking, please, I hope he opens it. And so I look again up, and it says, well, I can't eat honey right now. This honey, actually, honey, you have to store it for 1 year before you eat it. And that was it, you know. It's like
I mean, Prabhupada actually, he got pretty angry when he found out that I was doing all the cooking and nobody else was helping me. So everybody wanted to be in the classes, the morning walks and things, and I was the only one. And I had to cook for the deities, for the devotees, and for Srila Prabhupada as well. And it was quite a strain, really. So one day we ran out of gas, and Prabhupada's offering wasn't getting done, it wasn't getting cooked. Nothing was getting cooked. And I was just stressed out completely by that time. It was halfway through the week, and it was too much for me. And then Prabhupada was, he got told Harikesh to come and find out what I was doing. So then Harikesh went back and told him that, it's run out of gas and this and that, And Prabhupada was like, so, why? And then he asked who was helping me. And then Harikesh came out again, and I had to go and explain that I was doing it all by myself. I had to do everything, arrange, just everything. And Srila Prabhupada, he said to Harikesh, so you help. You go and help cook now. I didn't realize that you were under so much burden. And he was so humble about it, actually. And then Harikesh came in, and he was actually helping. But then he walked out the kitchen because there were some Maharajas in the kitchen, and he didn't want to be in there. So when he went back into Prabhupada asked him, why aren't you helping in the kitchen? And he said, oh, there's these Maharajas in there, he can manage. And Srila Prabhupada just got up and said, well, I'll go and help him then. You don't want to help, I'll help. So in this way it was very merciful.
When I was in London, before I went to Germany to do the BBT, I did some paintings, because Jamuna, knowing that I like to paint, I had done this little painting for Prabhupada for the Guru Dakshin. So she asked me to do some painting to decorate the temple. So I did, one big one, one small one, and it happened that the small one, the Panchatattva, was hanging in the staircase. So when we were, at one moment, we were going with Prabhupada down the staircase, and he saw that painting. So he immediately stopped, and he asked, who had done that painting? So I was right behind him, so I told Prabhupada that I did the painting, and then he said immediately, so you must come and do paintings and artwork for my books, which I never did, but he proposed. I mean, that was one capacity I had, but there was other things that were more important to do that he told me to do later on. So the other thing that I didn't mention, which is interesting, is that Prabhupada was so concerned with his books that one of the first questions, in fact, in London, the first time we saw him in '69, was, do you know how to type? And for me, this was a really strange question. A spiritual master, instead of giving this high spiritual understanding and fluids, he's telling you, do you know how to type? And in fact, I realized after, Prabhupada wanted me to do the French publications of his books. So as soon as he saw French devotees, immediately he was thinking of doing the work for the translation, and very shortly after I was translating the BTGs and then translating the books on his instruction.
The second time we went with Hanuman to see him, there were like 2 days, and he received us in his room, and very casual to very fatherly that time. He was smiling, he had a gamcha on, and you can see his knee, and one knee was up. And Satsarup Maharaj was taking care of some papers, and Madani was around him, and he was here in back of him for some reason. And Hanuman felt really bad for a long while about, leaving sannyas. So he again asked, said, "Oh, Prabhupada, I failed you. I'm now a lost cause." And Prabhupada was smiling, going, "No, no, no." And then he laughed, says, "No, it's just like playing mridanga," he said. And he went like this, and he's playing in his... So the more you practice, the better it gets. So Krishna consciousness is like that. He says, "Don't worry."
This is in 1975, because Krishna is, I guess according to my desires, but Krishna has given me somewhat of a strong physique. And in 1975, when Srila Prabhupada came to Hawaii once again, we went to the airport to greet him, went back to the temple, had darshan, he spoke to all the devotees, and then it was time for him to get his massage. So all the devotees were leaving. Sudama grabs me and he says, "Massage Prabhupada." And my heart skipped a few beats. And I said, "Massage Prabhupada?" I thought he was kidding. And he says, "Prabhupada is ready for his massage and he needs somebody to massage him. I would like for you to please give Prabhupada a massage. You have strong hands." So I was petrified. And I got a gumption. I went in, and Srila Prabhupada indicated to me how he wanted his massage. The head was very vigorous and took quite a long time. And then the chest and the back, you would kneel. If you're massaging Prabhupada's chest, you would kneel in front of him and go up and down on his chest. Now, when you push on somebody, you can feel them resisting you. This was not the case with Srila Prabhupada. I was kneeling in front of him, and I was going up and down on his chest. I couldn't budge him, and there was no resistance whatsoever. And for about 15 minutes, I'm massaging his chest, and he would keep saying, "Harder." And I'm just giving everything I have. His eyes are closed. And he kept saying, "Harder." And there's no resistance coming from him at all. And I was completely devastated because I'm thinking I'm so strong, but he was teaching me a lesson. Here's this old man, but he was like a rock, a boulder, which I couldn't budge. And the same thing happened when I did his back. He kept saying, "Harder." And I was just completely devastated. And his skin was like velvet. It was so soft, but yet he was so solid. He was just sitting there with his eyes closed. There was no big deal. And I was just couldn't budge him. And that at the end of the massage, he stood up and he went on his leg with his finger. Too much oil. And that was that. But it was such a lesson to not think that I'm strong, that the spiritual master is the strongest, and that I should follow humbly in his footsteps.
That's a good story.
There was one place outside where some Gaudiya Math brahmacharis were cooking big pots of prasadam up, cooking a big feast. And I was standing outside just watching them. And then all of a sudden, Prabhupada just walked up behind me. And he was standing just a little behind me. And he was standing at his cane and he was just looking. And I didn't even realize he was there. And then I think I was standing with Riksaraj. And then I just looked around and suddenly Prabhupada was there. I offered my obeisances. And then Prabhupada just turned around and he said, "And so if you can learn to cook like this, you can win the whole world." And these Gaudiya Math cooks are very expert. And then he just walked off. You know, just going for a stroll around by himself, looking at all the different preparations.
And then we had organized, that was bigger, more people came, and it was younger people. We had organized a lecture for him at the School of Architecture in Paris. So I was translating for him the lecture, and Prabhupada was very nice because he saw that I didn't have much, I was not very expert yet in translating. It was the first time I was doing it. So Prabhupada would be speaking very short sentences. And then as I was able to do, along the years, as I was able to translate better, then he would make the sentences much longer. And at one moment, it was astonishing, I was translated and I forgot to translate a part of what he said. And he noticed it. I don't know how he did, because I don't think Prabhupada knows French, but he noticed I missed a part. And he told me again the part I missed so that I would translate it. So, and I did.
At that time, Hanuman had lost his GBC. It was a whole thing about his being married. And so Hanuman said, "Well, Srila Prabhupada, I really don't seem to get along too well with my god brothers. You know." And his Prabhupada said, "Well, that's all right." I said, actually, I didn't like my spiritual master society either. and then he went, we were like surprised, and then he went like this with this in his hands, and he counted. He said, "Yes, I associated with my spiritual master about 10 times. And then he got serious, and he said, "But I follow all his instructions." And in that way, I wasn't separate from him, and you know, he wasn't away from me, and neither myself from him. And so it says, well, wherever there is two men, there is two opinions. So now you go and preach the call to Lord Chaitanya. And so Hanuman again asked, "Well, Srila Prabhupada, when you're gone, who's going to succeed you?" And Prabhupada quoted Lord Chaitanya's verse, and unfortunately I can't remember, but and he said, "I want all of you to become gurus. That's your duty, to follow in my footsteps." And Hanuman again asked about, what about for advice? And he says, "Go to the devotee that your heart tells you to." And that was it, and that was the 75.
I travelled, we'd been travelling by this time with Yashodanandan Swami's group, and there was Dira Krishna, myself, Riksaraj, a couple of other brahmacharis, and this was, I think, in 1977, and Prabhupada had come into the room just for a darshan in Delhi temple. And there was just 4 or 5 of us in the room with Prabhupada. And so he just asked us, "Have you got any questions you'd like to ask?" So immediately Dira Krishna, he asked Prabhupada questions about becoming a guru. You know, how does one become spiritual master? So Prabhupada, he called for the first canto of Bhagavatam, the story of Narada Muni. And so he just had that story read out. And every so often he would say, "Do you understand this?" And then after the story had been read, Dheera Krishna asked Prabhupada, "Well, could you elaborate on that so we can understand for ourselves?" So Srila Prabhupada, he said, "So you associate with devotees, you take the remnants of prasadam, just like Narada Muni's doing, and then he continued to take up the process of Krishna consciousness. You chant your rounds, all the rounds very nice, very clearly every day. You follow all the principles, regulative principles, and you act in an exemplary way. And you carry on this preaching." That was his main point. You carry on this preaching. Don't stop this preaching. And in that way, there can be many spiritual masters or many gurus.
I organized this with some other devotees. We made many pretty important people from France to come. One of them was from the government, a deputy, and one of them was the biggest university professor on Indian philosophy. How do you say in English? Indologist, I think I say. So all these people came to see Prabhupada, and when they would come, I would present to Prabhupada who they were, and then they would discuss together, and sometime myself, sometime Yogeshwar, sometime another devotee called Prituputra, we would translate the discussion. So what was very interesting during this discussion, one was at first, I was very glad to see that, but Prabhupada always wanted, like I said earlier, he wanted the devotees to come and listen. Because later on, it was impossible to approach Prabhupada. There was his guards always keeping the door closed. But at the beginning, Prabhupada always wanted the devotees to come. And he wanted it because he wanted them to learn how to preach by hearing him. And it's a fact that by hearing, we would learn a lot of how to preach, because so many different kind of people were coming to see him. So by being there for translating and for presenting the people who were coming, I noticed in his way of preaching to people that he would very much adapt to the different personalities. And sometimes he would have very friendly talks, and sometimes he would have pretty heavy discussion. And for example, one of those I brought, this professor from the university, Professor Lacombe, the head of Indologists in France. He was in fact a very nice person, because he was not just someone who teaches without believing in what he's teaching. He was someone who was actually believing in the philosophy. But he was in fact following a sampradaya, the Ramanuja sampradaya. So when Prabhupada talked with him, it was a wonderful, friendly talk. They talked in Sanskrit together. And Prabhupada was talking like with a friend, So where have you been in India? Do you know this, you know that? Very, very friendly talk. And I'm sure that if you had this very friendly talk with him, because this person was a sincere believer, he was not just someone who talks philosophy, but because that's his job, that's his. But it was because really he was believing in everything he was teaching. So it was a very nice talk.
One time I remember we were in Mexico too again, and there were two sannyasis from India that devotees had met in Sankirtan, and they wore this big red dot on their forehead, and devotees were like, "Oh, now Prabhupada is going to sauce them and put them in their place. They're impersonalists." And they had discussions and arguments with devotees, and it was a very big deal. And so that afternoon I was there in the room, excuse me, and these two sannyasis came in, and Prabhupada immediately, asked for a place to sit, and he was so friendly to them and spoke a little Bengali and Hindi, and then he went on to English for some reason. I guess one of them didn't speak any of the dialects. And they spoke very light, and he made them laugh. He did some jokes, and then he asked them if they knew Baba Gita. And they nodded, and they says, "Do you know Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu?" And they again nodded and says, "Well, so now please preach the cult of Lord Chaitanya, Haribol." And they both went up, their arms went up, and Haribol, and they were all smiles, and the argument was vanished, and prasadam was brought, and they were eating and so happy. And so it dissipated. I mean, situations were like, it seemed to be, he knew what to do at what particular time, exactly what to do, what to answer at what particular time, what particular person. You know.
It was a smallish program, and there was a group of devotees. We were, like Prabhupada was he'd gone up onto the Vyasasan, and he was giving his lecture in Hindi. And there was a group of maybe 10 or 12 devotees sitting round, and I was sitting right underneath the corner of the Vyasasan, and Hansaduta was there, and Yasodhanandan, and 2 or 3 others. And when Prabhupada started lecturing in Hindi, a whole bunch of the devotees just got up and they started getting up and leaving. So then Prabhupada just broke off the lecture, and he just looked down at us and said in English, "And this is for you as well. Where are they going? Stop them." And this. Stop them. You should all stay here and listen to this. We couldn't understand very much at all. He wanted us to learn Hindi so that we could preach nicely to the Indians. So it was quite a significant instruction in that sense, you know, that devotees were getting up and leaving and thinking that they could walk away from Prabhupada's lecture just because they weren't understanding the language, and he didn't like that at all. He wanted that everybody sat and listened, and whether they understood it or not, it was purifying. And he said as much afterwards as well, that you know, you devotees, you don't understand the potency of this prachar, you know, this preaching. You have to understand that is what is going to purify your hearts, and you become Krishna conscious, not by wandering around.
When he was talking to Christians, he would always, instead of like I would have been expecting that he would be discussing on comparative philosophy, very often he would bring the point, and strongly, of not eating meat and the animals having a soul. And at the beginning I was wondering why is he doing that, and then I realized is in fact these 2 religions, Vaishnavism and Christianity, they are very close because they are both monotheists, they are both impersonal. So the point was not to discuss these things where there is big similarities. What he wanted to bring out is that a big flaw in Christianity is this meat eating and killing. So very often he would, when meeting religious people, Christian religious people, bring these points, trying to prove to them philosophically that animals have a soul, using the regular, you know, philosophical arguments we gave, how the soul is going from one body to the other, and how the animal is changing bodies, but the soul is always there, just like when the child, and then you have the adult, they look so different, but it's still the same person, the same soul, so that the soul also, the animals are growing from body to body, but that there's a soul. So it's this is interesting, that Prabhupada was putting first, trying to see what was the problem in the flaw, what was missing in Christian philosophy was this understanding, because it's a fact that most of the Western countries are Christian, and most of the Western countries eat meat. And where is it from? It's from the religion. I mean, the Christianity would be forbidding meat, and most of the Western people would be vegetarians. So it's, in fact, it's a very, very important point in these countries that are all Christian to bring the point to the religious people of not killing animals, that animals have a soul. So he would often come with these points to these people.
We went into town one way, and then we came back another way through the sugarcane fields. And Srila Prabhupada said, "Pull over here." And he said, "Those big, tall sugar canes, you go and pick them." So we went, they were about 10 feet tall, and we went and picked these sugar canes. And when we got back to the temple, Srila Prabhupada changed from his dhoti into a gamcha. And in one of the vast puja books, there's, on one page, there's 4 small pictures of Srila Prabhupada. It's like a big plantation chair. And Srila Prabhupada is there eating sugar cane. But what you can't see in the picture is that we're all sitting at his lotus feet, and he would speak about chewing the chewed of the material world. If you're trying to enjoy the material world, it's like chewing the chewed. After the juice has been sucked out of the sugar cane, there's nothing left, there's no sweetness. But what was happening after Srila Prabhupada had finished chewing the sugar cane, he was discarding it, and we would all scramble for it, and it was so sweet. And we wondered about this analogy, but we concluded that because it was coming from Srila Prabhupada's lotus lips, that the sweetness had become magnified. So we were all getting this very special mercy. And he was sitting there in this big plantation chair, just like a little boy, chewing on the sugar cane. He was quite happy eating the sugar cane.
One is very interesting. It was a deputy. I mentioned earlier I met a deputy. So what was interesting about this deputy is that Prabhupada, he had a very good discussion with him. So what's bad is that I don't remember, it's so many years ago, the details of this discussion. I just remember some points. But for us, I remember the points that struck me, on how Prabhupada was preaching. And to the politician also. Amongst other philosophical discussion, he brought the point of animal killing also, because the politician, there are also some people who can do something about it, So he talked about that, and of course the deputy, would not accept easily. He couldn't see how people would survive if they didn't eat. And Prabhupada came to the point at the end, and that was astonishing, where he said that if people absolutely want to eat meat, then eat the cows when they are dead. Wait until their natural death and then eat them. So that was also interesting. I never anywhere else heard Prabhupada talking like that. And one funny thing happened. This is interesting, not for the story itself, but for Prabhupada. He was so humoristic, and he was always so quick to answer to something. He was always amazing us for that. So one of the person we brought was a psychiatrist. And the reason I thought of bringing in this person is that this psychiatrist was pretty much known in France, and he was a religious psychiatrist. And when he was trying to take care of his patients, it was through spiritual life. He was trying to show them how spiritual life would help them, religious life would help them. He was very religious. So I had him come, and so I went down, to receive him, to bring him to Prabhupada. And when I was downstairs, he wouldn't come. So I went back to Prabhupada, and I told him what happened. I said, "Well, I meet him downstairs, but no, it's not that he wouldn't come. What happened exactly is that when I met him, so this is how I retold it to Prabhupada, I met him downstairs and I invited him to come in to see you, but what he said was, where is the patient?" So he had understood. He was maybe a very good psychiatrist, but I guess he misunderstood what he was asked, and he thought that we had asked him to come and take care, I guess, of some Indian pandit or spiritual master. He didn't understand that it was to have a philosophical discussion with him. So when I saw that to Prabhupada, that his answer was, "Where's the patient?" So Prabhupada, he was laughing and laughing, and that when he realized there was no patient, he didn't want to come and just left. So when I told that to Prabhupada, Prabhupada just started to laugh, and he said, he didn't realize he was the patient. So this is funny. Prabhupada was very, I mean, I just have a few funny stories about Prabhupada, but so many devotees have told me stories. Well, Prabhupada is so funny, you know.
Okay, this is the 1976. We've arrived to India with Gargamuni Maharaj, and we were in a travel and Sankirtan party that went from Germany to, well, actually we started in the US and then collected, and lots of money at that time. We used to call it Gargamani. The devotees came in, and so we went to Germany and bought vans and equipped them with really state-of-the-art stuff, films of all the temples and deities, to paintings and pictures of all the deities. And we had thousands of them. And we went through got to India, and so I got there a little bit before the festival hit. And Prabhupada, I think, was arriving maybe 2 days or so later. I think it was during the festivals in early '76. And this morning, this particular morning, I remember Prabhupada gave about a 2-hour lecture. It was quite lengthy. And it was all about consciousness. And not the dress, he said. He pointed, he says, you could be perfectly shaven and have nice tilak, and then he looked at the devotee and says, how much is a thread? 20 paisa. Yeah, 20 paisa. I could go buy at the market a thread and put it on, but that doesn't make me a Brahmin, Prabhupada said. It's a matter of consciousness. And then I remember he looked down and he said, the fly is sitting in the same seat as the spiritual master, but consciousness is different. So he emphasized that consciousness above dress or anything else, and to the development of that consciousness through the process of bhakti yoga and rendering service to the pure devotee.
So I organized a whole big publicity throughout Paris. You know, we had very big posters of Prabhupada that we would put on the walls everywhere. We had smaller ones that we would put in all the stores, on the doors of the stores. And I had organized that all the streets of Paris were covered, you know. And it was even at the point that these big posters of Prabhupada, we put them in so many different places that they stayed there for months and months and months. And we would be driving through Paris or going here and there. You had always Prabhupada all over Paris. So I mean, it was an easy time also at that time. You could put your posters everywhere. You know, now it's more difficult. But so I was in very much anxiety because we had this big hall, you know, and I was hoping it would be filled, you know. So when I arrived to translate for Prabhupada, I was in this anxiety, you know, entering into the room to see how it was. And when I entered, it was filled with people, you know. Out of 2,000 places, we had 1,800 people who came. So it was really a big success. And we had this big stage. Prabhupada was there with a nice vyasasana and all the devotees sitting around him, and I translated for Prabhupada. So Prabhupada gave a lecture, and again he tried to do something which would have to do with France, and France being a Catholic country. He started his lecture with how in Christianity it is said that at the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So he used that to show the importance of the Word, the mantras, the name of Krishna. And then he gave this lecture. And but something happened then, is that at that time, the people, there was a lot of, the young people were very much into politics, and especially into communism. So many of the people who came, they were these people, communist people. And at one moment, Prabhupada gave an example, which is no problem if you are not in a political situation, but which might be very dangerous in a political situation, how the authority of the king, and how the person who is under the king has as much authority. He also has great authority because his superior is the king. You know, he mentioned something like that. Oh, this was pretty bad at that moment, and you had all these people, you know, started to make noise, and more and more noise in the back of the hall. And I was very much getting anxiety, what's going to happen, you know. And fortunately, the devotees, they were able to calm down the people, and we could go on with the lecture. And then at the end of the lecture, one of these people, or another one, I don't remember, one came up, you know, really angry, came down and he started to talk. And he said, "Why are you sitting on this throne?" And he said it in a very harsh way, very bad way. So this is also funny how Prabhupada, he senses everything. I was very embarrassed to translate for him what that man said. So I kind of arranged what he said, you know, so that it would not be so bad. And then Prabhupada told me, "No, what did he say?" Exactly. Yeah, and I had to say exactly exactly what that person said. So then Prabhupada always very good at giving good answers. He said that you can also sit on this seat if you can talk on spiritual philosophy. So the person didn't know much what to say anymore, if he could also do it. And so it stopped like that. But then, and that's where it's very instructive, Prabhupada, after we left, he said, "From now on, when I'm in France, you should just give me a regular seat, no Vyasasana, you know." And this is instructive in the sense that you can see that Prabhupada, he didn't care for the external of his preaching mission, Vyasasana or no Vyasasana. You know, if it's good, we have one. If it's not good, we don't have one. It's not that he was attached to the external ritualistic aspects of Krishna consciousness. So this is a good point, and I often use it when I discuss with devotees, because very often people are very, very attached to the externals, and they are not ready to adapt according to the situations or the country or the different times. But Prabhupada himself was always an example how you must adapt, you know, according to circumstances. It doesn't matter. Important is to preach. The not important is the Vyasasana or no Vyasasana.
One of the ladies that lived on the edge of the beach park, she had a big German Shepherd dog. And this German Shepherd dog, every day when Srila Prabhupada would come for his walk, this German Shepherd dog would come out and run around Srila Prabhupada. And usually with dogs, Srila Prabhupada, he would, you know, keep them at a distance and like that. But this dog, he didn't take any offense. And the dog would run around and around and around and come up and graze Srila Prabhupada's leg, and Srila Prabhupada would just keep walking. There was something special about this living entity in this dog's body. And one day, the dog ran right between Srila Prabhupada's leg. And we were all petrified. We, you know, should we chase this dog? And Srila Prabhupada just chuckled. There was some special ras that they had. The day after Srila Prabhupada left, the dog disappeared, just vanished. And the lady called us up and she said, "I know the dog came and walked with you and played, you know, with you every day, and now he's disappeared. Have you seen him?" I said, "No, we haven't seen him. He never showed up again." There's just that special ras. And there was another animal. Just before Srila Prabhupada came, Govinda Dasi had found these little kittens on the side of the road when she was going to the store. And she brought them back, and she would give them milk on the back porch. And there was one that she had named Nimbarka Das Brahmachari. Now one day Srila Prabhupada walked out through the kitchen, out the back door, to go out to the yard and have a little walk. And he didn't know the kitten was there. And he just touched it with his foot and went on his way. The day after Srila Prabhupada left, we gave the kitten away to a neighbor. The kitten died the next day. So once again, a special encounter with Lord Krishna's pure devotee.
I remember that in London I was going the morning walks. Even at one morning walk there was one nice thing that astonished me very much. And then later on thinking of it, I was thinking, wow, such a nice and kind person Prabhupada is. We were just completely new people, you know, the three of us, and so we were going on the morning walks with Prabhupada. And at one moment, it was December, so it's very cold in December in London. At one moment he turned around to my school friend Mandakini, and he told her, "Are you cold?" And I found that pretty proud, you know, that here who were we, you know, these just completely young girls, new girls, you know, just arriving there. And the Prabhupada, this great spiritual master, is concerned, you know, that the person is not cold, you know. That was very nice.
But then, on that, I think it was that same occasion, there was one lady, I don't remember who she is, or I never heard about her since, whether she got initiated or anything. But it was quite a very touching thing. I felt it was very touching. I noticed this, that this lady had been following in the distance. And Prabhupada had noticed her. No, I don't think anybody else had noticed her. She was a Western woman, I think American or something. And she had when we had stopped in this little copse of trees, she had gone to a tree and she'd picked some flowers off the tree. And she was standing. Nobody had noticed her. But Prabhupada, he just come like this. And she just came over through all the devotees, sannyasis, and she just offered the flowers to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada took the flowers and he just thanked her. He said, "Sit down." So he just asked her to sit down with us. And to me that was very touching. You know, it was very nice because he had noticed her standing in the background, very shy, didn't know what to do, and he didn't make her feel uncomfortable or anything. You know, he just called her over, and he'd accepted that flower. You know, and he sat and he just played with that flower the whole time, and that was actually a very nice time. But
he didn't discriminate.
He didn't discriminate that, oh, she's a woman, sannyasi or anything, you know. I think he actually asked someone to give one of the devotees, brahmacharis, to give their chadar so she could sit down on the ground. So he was actually very kind like that to the lady, you know, Mataji.
How about to your sister? Any conversations?
Yes, Bhakta Dasi became the art director for BBT and organized her vast knowledge of publication helped us save thousands of dollars. He managed to put all the pictures together in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so she had an office, and after the initial meeting, this is in 1975. She's back in Los Angeles and being the art director, and all of a sudden one morning Prabhupada shows up at BBT. And with the entourage of sannyasis, Bhavananda was there, I remember, because he later on told me something. And so they went straight to her office, and boom, the door opens, and it's Srila Prabhupada. And of course she pays, obeisances, and it's just like, I was really taken aback. And Prabhupada just like, he could, with his eyes, you could see, he calmed the whole room. I remember her telling me this a few times, and I hope I do justice to the story of it. And his eyes stopped for a long time at a picture. She had gone through she reminded me that all the photographs at that time, they were all in shoeboxes on one room. Everything that we ever had, collected from all these different sources and the US BBT had. And she found a picture of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And she had it framed and then put it on her desk. And Prabhupada looked at the room and he was very impressed. And she was a very meticulous person, and so it's a very spotless place. But he went into like a trance on this picture. The room, the silence, and then he looked at her, and she knew it was like a child asking for, would you give me this? Without asking, this is what she thought. And so immediately she took it and gave it to him. He kept it. He kept her for a while she was asking her. But the very first thing he asked her, it was very fatherly. He says, "Where are your children?" "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, you can see through this window." There was a BBT, there was another building next to you see there's a little space in between the two buildings, and through the window you can see the building, her apartment. And she had a friend, brahmachari, that Hanuman had made devotee, taking care of them. He liked to do that, and so, okay, he says, that's very good. And then went on to ask about the technical questions, something like that. And I found out about the meeting because when I got to New York, Bhavananda came in, Bhavananda Maharaj at that time, and came in, and Prabhu came in and says, "Oh, you're Bhaktadasi's brother?" Ah, Prabhupada says, "She's very intelligent." And then he went, he said, "I'm sannyas, I shouldn't talk like this." But yeah, so I feel like I should say something like this because she's passed away, and she worked very hard to please Srila Prabhupada too. So.
It's the only really time when I went to him with a very particular problem and asking him to solve this problem, you know. Otherwise I was just serving him in these different capacities, but I never had to go. In fact, that was the only problem I had in the movement, which I'm working on now, as you can see. It is that it was the time when it started to develop in the whole movement that the women could not give class, you know. So I had been giving classes for years and years. I've been lecturing outside in schools, in universities, you know, in so many different places, giving the Sunday lectures. I mean, doing because you know, it was in my mentality to do all this preaching. So this it started in America that the women could not give classes, and in France, they didn't dare to tell me not to give classes, but they were lobbying against women giving classes. You know, when it came from America to Europe, and the men who before used to attend the classes very happily and be very satisfied and always asking me questions after the classes, and they started to, I felt it, you know, they started to not want so much to come to the class when it was me giving it, you know. All these things started because they were getting all these instruction against women, you know, in the temple, and their mentality, their attitude was completely changing towards the women, especially towards me, because at that time I was the mother of the temple, I was taking care of everybody, and their mentality changed completely. So I was getting more and more worried, and even though nobody ever dared to directly tell me you are not allowed to give classes anymore like they did in America, but the feeling was more and more, you know, trying to get me out of doing it indirectly. So I went with Yogeshwar to see Prabhupada to ask him about the women giving classes. And he kept on, and I was giving as example, Jyotirmayi has always been giving classes, so is it possible for the women to give classes, that I give classes? And Prabhupada, the way he presented it, he said, yeah, Jyotirmayi can give class and you can give class. I mean, I have the tape and I have the transcript of it, I don't remember now in the details, but the general idea is that that your husband is a Brahmin, so you are a Brahmin, you can give classes. You know, you assist your husband in this Brahminical work, so you can give classes. You know, so he gave me, he reassured me that I could give classes, and so I went on for a little longer, giving the classes, being reassured by him, and then later on, it was becoming more and more heavy. You know, the pressure against women giving classes, especially then at that time I was the only one doing it. So I wrote to Prabhupada again on the subject matter. And then it's a little funny what happened, is that at that time when I wrote him, Prabhupada was not anymore directly answering himself the lecture, but he had the letters. He had his secretary, Brahmananda, he would tell him the answer, and Brahmananda would write the answer and send it. It was not his own writing anymore like before. So at that time, I had written to Prabhupada about that, and Bhagavan was the GBC there, had written to Prabhupada about something else. So Brahmananda, when he sent us the answer, he sent us in the same letter. And so one part was the answer to Bhagavan, and then there was a little part at the end, which was his answer to me. And if you know what happened with that letter, Bhagavan never showed it to me. He read his part and then threw it in the garbage and didn't show me my part of the answer. And somehow or other, and there I think it was Krishna in the heart, I had to go in his office for something. And for some reason, I don't know why, I looked in the garbage can, and I saw the letter. And I opened the letter, and I saw the answer that was given to me. And again, the answer was, yes, you can, Jyotirmayi said, and as far as Jyotirmayi's question, yes, she can give classes. You know, you can tell her that, yes, she can give classes, you know. But this was so heavy that Bhagavan didn't want me to know the answer, and with the pressure that even though I was not stopped officially, I was so disgusted and discouraged that I stopped at that time, you know, to lecture. So this in fact, so the only direct question I had to Prabhupada was on this subject matter, you know.
There's another, this was in San Francisco, I guess about 71, 72. There was, in the this was when the temple was on Valencia Street, and there wasn't really nice accommodations for Srila Prabhupada. So one of the friends of the temple, he had a nice house over in Berkeley, and Srila Prabhupada would stay over there. And in the evening, all the devotees would go over to the house and take Prabhupada's darshan. And one night, I was sitting right up by Srila Prabhupada's desk, and he was sipping milk. He had a nice goblet and spoon, and he was just sipping the milk. And he was explaining that milk should be taken sipping hot. That if it's cooler than that, it simply goes to urine. But you should take it sipping hot. And then it goes to the brain to nourish the brain, the finer brain tissues. And a few minutes later, he puts his spoon down. And I looked in the goblet, and it was still half full. So the temperature had cooled down, and he just stopped drinking it. And he didn't say anything for a minute, and he was gazing in the back of the room. And I followed his gaze, and there was Jayananda. He was sitting in the back of the room, completely sound asleep. But Srila Prabhupada just looked at him like, you know, they had such a special relationship. There was so much love between the two of them. He knew Jayananda worked so hard, and he didn't say anything.
We were in Mayapur, and Hridayananda Maharaj was very ill, stomach pain and like that. So Srila Prabhupada said, Tulsi water. You just drink Tulsi water. And it did help him. You could ask him. I remember he was very much in pain. He was very ill, and it really did help him.
Just one occasion he came out of his room, he came round and he was about to climb up onto the concrete platform, and he just noticed that there was some little prasadam had been spilt or left there, some dal or something. So Prabhupada looked at it, then he climbed up onto his Vyasasan, and he said, so, who is responsible for not cleaning? So everybody was looking at each other and didn't know what he was talking about. So then he was just pointing like this. And Pati Udaran, he jumped up and he realized that this little bit of prasadam, you know, was stuck on the concrete. And so he pulled out a little penknife, and he's opened up the blade, and he was on his hands and knees, and he was about to start scraping it up. So he was like this. But Prabhupada had bent over the Vyasasan, and he was looking right down. And so Pati had the knife in his hand like this, and he was looking up at Prabhupada, and they were looking into each other's faces. And Prabhupada, he said, so what is this for? And he said, I'm going to clean. And Prabhupada just shook his head and he said, use it for this. And then he said, this is malecha. This is malecha attitude. Brahmins, they use water. They use water to clean. Is there no Brahmin here? And so someone had to run away and get a bucket of water and come back and mop it up. So then he gave a pretty heavy lecture then about cleanliness and uncleanliness and Brahminical standards, and you can hear all those on tape ministry.
Another one that was interesting also, because it was a learning experience also on how to talk to people. This devotee, this man, it's a devotee called Prituputra who had him come, and he was the head of the only vegetarian chain of stores, the chain of vegetarian stores in France, because at that time it was very rare, vegetarianism. But this one, he was the director of this chain called La Vie Claire, and he had one shop like that in the main cities of France. So it was, in a sense, an extraordinary personality, because he was the only one in the whole of France who was doing that. So again, the people, they would be very gladly coming to see Prabhupada. So he came to see Prabhupada. It was called Monsieur Geoffroy. And so they discussed on pure life and pure eating. And what was interesting on their discussion is that this Monsieur Geoffroy was trying to really explain how through vegetarian biological food, especially biological food, you can eat very, very pure things. But still, the point was coming that it's very difficult to have completely, absolutely pure, because even though you may grow biological, I mean, you have the rain with all kind of acid and toxic things coming on your field. So you want to buy a paper plate, and your paper plate, they have put some animal fat in it, or you have your bees to create your pure honey, but they may have been taking the pollen from some flowers where there's toxic, the things they put, to make the things grow, pesticide or things like that. So they were discussing like that, and coming to the point that it's not really possible to have fully pure. And so then Prabhupada said, that's the reason why we chant Hare Krishna, because it's impossible to have it completely pure. But through the chanting, then you can make it completely pure. So I remember that Prabhupada at this point, which is a good point for whoever really wants to have completely pure food, that the only way to make it completely pure is to chant Hare Krishna. After you have tried everything, that will be the only thing that will make it finally completely pure.
And there was one instance actually in a Hyderabad temple where Srila Prabhupada, he actually asked for a plate of the prasadam that all the devotees were going to eat. And for the feast, actually, it was a feast. And it was a hired cook who was doing the cooking. So when they brought the plate in to Prabhupada, I went in the room as well, I mean 2 or 3 of us went in the room, put the plate in front of Prabhupada. Prabhupada just took one look at it, and he just shook his head and he said, no, this is not good. He didn't even taste it. And he said the devotees, they should have good, nice prasadam. And so he sent it away, and then he sent for Mahamsa, and he said, you should fire that man, get rid of him. He's told you he's a Brahmin, and he's not, he's a fake. He doesn't know anything. And then he said, I want my devotees to cook. So he had me and 2 or 3 others, we all had to cook a feast, and then Prabhupada, he on a number of occasions actually, in Bombay and different places, he would do that. He would taste. He would instead of having this prasadam that was specially prepared for him, He would just take what everybody else was taking, and he was just primarily concerned that all the devotees were happy. You know, they were satisfied. So you could see that over and over again on so many ways of his dealing with his disciples. You know, that he wanted them to be very happy and satisfied in Krishna consciousness, and it would disturb him to hear that there was some complaints or arguments.
Yogeshwar and I, we used to have to quarrel over the service, you know, what was the best way to do the service, and he had his idea and I had my idea, so often we would have discussion on that and quarreling over that. And at one moment, Prabhupada, he told us, and don't quarrel so much. And we were wondering, well, how does he know, you know, that we are quarreling? And he gave the example, but that the quarreling of devotees is not like ordinary quarreling, because they are quarreling about how is the best way to serve Krishna, you know. So this also happened.
Then he told Hanuman, says, "Oh, the most, it will be 3 lifetimes for my initiated disciples, at the most. But don't make me work," he said, "don't make me come back."
There was one occasion actually when a number of sannyasis were in Vrindavan. They were doing this Jyotirmayi. There's quite a few of them. Most of them were fairly newish sannyasis at the time. And they were all growing these beards, and they were all in the dham, you know, chanting the extra rounds and things. It was a rainy season, and I'd been out with a group of devotees preaching, came back, and spoken to Srila Prabhupada about the preaching programs. And then Prabhupada came into the temple room and he just told all these sannyasis, "What are you sannyasis doing here? Why are you in the temple growing beards, eating, in the name of, you know, Krishna consciousness? Sannyasi's business is to go out and preach." So in that way he sent all the sannyasis out preaching.
But what I discussed with him was the curriculum, was what we should teach or not teach. And he gave me very good ideas on some points. Like I was talking to him about history, and if we should teach him history. And Prabhupada said 2 very good points on how to teach history. So he said yes. He said, first, they should be taught what everyone knows, you know, which means that it's not that we have to go into all the details, you know, but it should not be that they appear ignorant, you know, they don't know who is Napoleon, or, you know, there's some basics that they should know, you know, and even not just basics, you know, but what most educated people know about history, our children should know, you know, so that's very important instruction. He gave another instruction on geography. So he said yes, that they should learn geography, the hills, the mountains, the rivers, you know, all these things. On history also he gave another very good point. He said that they should be told the facts, not the interpretations, you know, so this was also interesting. And the point where I've always been a little bit confused about was the biology. I asked him about, because we were in the country, you know, so I was saying, so what about teaching them about, you know, the birds, the trees, the different kind of flowers, you know, all this thing on biology. And there Prabhupada was not interested. He said, what you should teach them is who it is coming from, that there is the trees, there is the flowers, there is the birds. You know, he wanted more that it be the philosophical aspect that be presented to them more than the actual biology. So as far as the curriculum, these are some of the points I remember we discussed in that particular talk we had. But I think that's mainly what I discussed.
There, I remember being in a morning walk up on the roof in Mayapur too, and this was about Gurukula, and it became a very key thing for me later on when I heard from grown-up children what Gurukula was about. But at that time, Jagaman was little. He was about 10 years old. and there was some disagreement. He was kind of being rebellious with the teacher, and this teacher decided to not feed him for the whole day. And when Prabhupada heard this, I'd never seen him angry before. He hit the roof, and he said, this man should be punished. This teacher should be punished. A child should never be starved or, not fed. And so the devotees went to look for him, and like that. And he had run to the train station. But I saw how much importance Prabhupada gave to everyone, no matter how old or how young they were or what gender they were.
Because I did some changes that, according to me, was more appropriate because of practical experience, and I was criticized for it, But like, for example, I could have asked Prabhupada, but I didn't think of doing it. At that time, the children would just go attend the general Bhagavatam class, every day. And we teachers would be there trying constantly to stop them from being nonsense, from doing some coloring or something, so don't they disturb the class, and the children, their last interest was hearing what was going on in the class. So I was doing like everybody else. But then it just took me a few months to realize this is really not a good system, So the next time I did a Gurukul, I didn't do that anymore. I did myself a special Bhagavatam class for the children, directed to the children, and it worked much better. But I didn't get the chance to discuss it with Prabhupada and ask Prabhupada, what do you think about that? Would it be a good idea? So I just did it, just on the principle that Prabhupada told us when he saw what happened in the Gurukul in Dallas. He said these teachers should be hung, those who are doing really outrageous things. And then he said, but use your common sense. But because Prabhupada said that, even though he was not there anymore, I could not ask him, I just used my common sense, and I acted according to common sense. And it was very successful, because I had a successful Gurukul, and I didn't get all the problems with the children that other Gurukuls got, who just did the regular way without adapting according to children,
Just after the Guru Puja, we just offered the Guru Puja, and Prabhupada was about to start singing, and then there was a clattering going on. And there was someone was banging on the door of the Bhoga room. And so Prabhupada stopped, and he put the cartels down, and he was looking over at the room, and the devotee was making a noise, and he asked, bring him over here, why is he disturbing the class? So the devotee came running over, and Prabhupada, he says, so why are you making so much noise? So he said, oh, there's a devotee. He said, there's a devotee sleeping in the Bhoga room. And Prabhupada just looked very surprised. He said, is it a devotee or a demon? He said, devotees are coming to Bhagavatam class. They want to hear from their spiritual master. So he said, bring him here. So anyway, the door, like somebody ran over and banged on the door. Now they had Prabhupada's authority. So they were shouting out, Srila Prabhupada wants you to come immediately, whoever's in there. So the door just flew open, and this devotee half fell out the door with seeker all over the place and sleep in his eyes. And he just started walking, staggering almost, he was still half asleep. And then suddenly he realized that Prabhupada was sitting right in front of him. And he just stopped dead. He just stopped in his tracks, and he just fell on the floor, dandavats. And up until that point, Prabhupada was looking like really stern, like he was really going to say something to this boy. But then, when the boy got up and he started, Prabhupada was saying, come here. So he was coming a little closer. He stopped and he, no, come here. And he come a bit closer and a bit closer. And then Prabhupada realized that he was actually a fairly new devotee. And so he just said to him, so, you are devotee or demon? And the boy just said, I think I'm a devotee. And so Prabhupada said, so devotees come to Guru Puja, their Guru's Puja, and they come to Bhagavatam class. They don't miss these things. You should sit down and you should come to the class. So he wasn't very, very, very strong on him. But then he turned on Mahamsa Swami. He just turned on him and he just said, and because the leadership is so dirty, untidy, everything is a mess. You know, sadham is wasted. Everything is in a mess here.
In 1975, I started a business in Hawaii. I had access to about 500,000 pounds of raw honey. And because Lord Balaram likes honey, it was a business that we could do, and also it was prasadam distribution. In Hawaii there's 9 main islands, hence the name New Navadweep. So I lived on the big island of Hawaii at that time, and we were getting this, we were packing and marketing raw Hawaiian honey. And I wrote to Srila Prabhupada about, you know, what are the, you know, should we, you know, tithe a certain percentage, you know, to the temple or to specific projects? And he said, the formula that we're following, the example that we're following is to give 50%. Then your business will be successful. If you do not give 50%, then it will not be successful. So I've always tried to do like that. And I actually met with Srila Prabhupada. I sent him this letter explaining about the honey business and how the first year we had distributed 100,000 pounds of honey, and we're going into our second year, and that I was getting distributors on the different islands, and I was trying to get devotees to do the business. So when he came to visit, the letter got to him, and that afternoon I went up and visited with Srila Prabhupada. I got to see him that afternoon. We talked a little bit about it and like that. And I had already sent him some honey, and he was very much liking it. So I asked him, you know, about that, and he said yes, the formula is to give 50%.
Before I joined, I told you I was a university student. So after I've been something like 2 years in a movement, and wanting so much to preach, at one moment I considered, wow, if I had gone on with my studies, because it was ethnology, it was religion and culture of the different countries, I could have taught Vaishnavism in the university, and the university I was going was this very known university, the Sorbonne, you know. So I was thinking like that, and I was discussing it with Yogeshwar, that maybe I should go back and then I could teach like that in the university. And Yogeshwar asked the question to Prabhupada, and he said, so he explained the situation, how I was a student, and he said, what about Jyotirmayi, going back to university, finishing her course, and then being able to teach Krishna consciousness in the Sorbonne? And Prabhupada said, yes, she can do it, she's a very intelligent girl. So this is also something, you see, many of the things that happen with me directly with Prabhupada have been things that have been comforting me for the rest of my time in Krishna consciousness, because many of the things that women have been accused of, you know, like being stupid, being completely unable to become Krishna conscious or to be good devotees, you know, personally, Prabhupada himself, you know, in different instances said I was a good devotee. In that instance and another instance when we were discussing Gurukul, he said in 2 instances that she's a very intelligent girl. So I was thinking, well, they may be saying all these things, you know, but I know what Prabhupada has told me, you know, and this gave me courage to go on and go on, even though there was all these problems as far as the women are concerned.
So in Mexico City, we asked, she had a chance to be in a few more meetings with Hanuman, because there were details Hanuman wanted to find out, and it was very important things about zones or where to come and not, and Prabhupada didn't seem to attach very much importance to the zones. He actually thought that we should preach any place, everywhere. and that there might be differences of opinion, but we should, our goal was to propagate the cult of Lord Chaitanya. And so Dasi was in the meeting, and they were all asking, for some reason they were talking about liberation and when everybody was going to get liberated. And they looked at her and said, and you'll be liberated in this lifetime, to my sister, to Bhakta. And that was in 75. And years went by, and now last December I had a chance to see her depart, and it was very ecstatic too, of course, and we did feel the presence there again of Prabhupada.
It was at a time when I was in very much confusion, because we had moved the BBT to New York, because New York was the place where now there was the international BBT, so all the translators were there working together, so I was there also doing the translation, and I was getting kind of disturbed because it was very difficult, because I was losing my French, so when you translate you better speak good French, and by never speaking French, and I could not get new translators. I had only Americans around me, so I couldn't see how I would develop the translation work. So I wanted very much to go back to France and do it there. But of course the temple presidents and the leaders, they didn't want Yogeshwar and me to leave, because we were also doing so many services, so they wanted to keep us there. So in one way I could understand that they wanted us there, but at the same time I was thinking I can never really develop Prabhupada's French BBT in that way. So I was very much in anxiety, and one day I was really praying and praying and praying in front of Prabhupada's picture to know what to do, in this circumstance. And about the same time, there has been discussion about a GBC going to France, and I had written a letter to Prabhupada only on a very specific translation thing, which was that the word Supreme Personality of Godhead was very difficult to translate for us in France. So it was difficult to know what to do. So I wrote to Prabhupada and I told him, so we could give him 3 proposals. I said, what do you think is the best of the 3 proposals? Which I translated back, in English, so that he would understand. So then he answered me on these 3 proposals. He told me, so you take this one, which is the one we have been using since then. And at the same time, he told me in that letter, so now I'm sending Bhagavan Das to be the GBC in France, and I think that you and your husband, you should go back to France now and do your work there, So I thought, phew, this is really mystical, that I prayed to have an answer, but he didn't write about it. And in his answer to my technical question of translation is giving me the answer to my particular problem. And the way I explain that is that it's Satsvar Maharaj who explained that, because devotees, they're really wondering, how much does the spiritual master know the devotee's heart? And he asked Satsvar Maharaj had asked the question to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada gave the answer that it is as much as the devotee thinks of the spiritual master thinks of the devotee. So what I understood from that is that when you're so intense in your prayer to Prabhupada, so intense and sincere, then Prabhupada does hear your prayer. You may be, thousands of kilometers away, and does in one way or another answer you. But sometimes our prayer is not so strong and we don't get the answer because the message didn't go through, because the intensity was not there. So that's how I explain it. Some people might explain it in some other ways, but that was interesting.
Prabhupada would give lots of instructions about deity worship, things like this. He came in one time into the deity room, the pujari room. And I was up in the pujari room, and Prabhupada looked at the flower garlands. At that time the flower garlands were being made the day before, and they were being kept somewhere for the next morning. And Prabhupada just looked at the flower garlands, and he turned his nose up, and he turned around at Shayananda and said something to the effect that why are you offering rotten flowers to the deities? Why are they not fresh? And it's like, these were only made yesterday, Prabhupada. Yesterday isn't good enough. They must be made now, fresh. You can't offer some old flowers, you know, he was speaking in this way.
He gave me one instruction at that time, which is something I've always been having difficulties working on, which is, he told me, don't do everything yourself. Get other people to do the work, because the idea is that in order to do a lot, you have to have plenty of people doing some, that you delegate, that they do the work so that you can do more and more. Otherwise you can never do enough, you know. So, and it's interesting that he told me that at that time, because this is one point which is difficult for me, to be able to always gather enough devotees to do the work so that I can do always more and more, you know, because when I'm myself doing all the details, I cannot do much, but if I can get people to do the details, then I can do more and more and more. So for me personally, it was an interesting instruction.
Like we were there and there was this Prabhu, I wish I remember his name, he was about to go to Hungary, and that time it was the Iron Curtain, and it was, you know, the very big chance that if he would go in, he would never be able to come back out into the West. And so many questions were brought by this Prabhuji, and the sannyasins were there, and so we were asking, so at one point he asked him, well, Srila Prabhupada, they did send us they put us in jail a few times, and what do we do? They try to force us to eat meat. And, shall we fast? And Prabhupada said, yes. Even to death? And Prabhupada said, yes. So, for some people it might be hard to understand, but at that time it makes so much sense. And it didn't matter, really. It's not because of anything, but I had a chance to, actually, I was Sankirtan leader for a minute there in Buenos Aires, and because Hanuman was a foreigner, and we were afraid that if he would leave, nobody would know what to do. So we always split the party in different ways, so the police would chase us, and then I was the one to be taken out to the police station, and I would then, after an hour, explain the philosophy, usually, and they would let us go. But there was a chance, there was one time where they didn't. They took me straight from the police station to the secret police department complex. Very difficult, very heavy place. Argentina is not, a very difficult place at times. And well, of course, it was interrogation all day long and threats of losing our life, etc. But there was never a moment, and it was all thanks to Prabhupada. And I know there was never a moment I was afraid. In any other instance, for me to do anything else for anybody else, I think I'll be afraid. I will think twice to do anything. But at that time, there was no fear. I experienced what to be in no anxiety and no fear. Even though in the midst of this, I was praying to Prabhupada.
He went on a walk. He would circumambulate the temple, Krishna Balaram temple. He'd walk around it 3 times. And as he would walk around it, he would point out different things. And we walked past this, where the pots were being washed. That's where the Gurukul building was starting to be built. And we walked in there, and this old lady, she was sitting down, hunched down, and she was scrubbing these pots with, I think it's coconut or something like that, grass, and ashes. And Prabhupada stopped next to her, and he just stood and he just watched her for a moment. And then he turned round to all the devotees and he just said, and so this is how we clean our pots. You Western people, you think that clean means inside. But we clean the outside as well. You learn from this lady. She comes here every day, this is her service. She works for Krishna like this. And she can do perfectly, And in this way he was teaching us that everything had to be done in a certain way. So So he would walk around and if there was anything wrong, you could be sure Prabhupada would find it. Anything. If there was a broken gutter, a pipe, or a window that was loose, Prabhupada would find it and he'd say something about it. It was amazing, actually. You just noticed every single thing. And there was a broken drain coming out of the deity kitchen, and some water and rice and stuff had been coming out from the pipe. Prabhupada stopped. He had everyone gather around it. Everyone, he'd have this, everyone would have to gather around it, and then he would say, and this is your Western mentality. Everything is always dirty. You don't know how to clean. You don't know what is clean. In this way, again and again and again, he would stress his point. Brahmin means clean. Brahmin means, personally you're clean. Your brain, your mind is clean, and he just tried to bring up the standards. He would always be wanting the devotees to bring their standards up.
When Prabhupada came to New Mayapur at that time, I was the Gurukul headmistress. So my relationship with him was as far as the Gurukul. So, and something very interesting happened also at that time. So Prabhupada wanted to meet all the Gurukul children, all the teachers. So we all went to his room, and Prabhupada gave a very nice speech. And so, that's the interesting part. One of the things Prabhupada wanted us to do was to have the children chant japa. And the way people used to do it before was to give them these long japa beads, like us, and have them with everybody else in the temple room, and try to have them chant and punish them very heavily if they didn't chant, And when I saw that, when I arrived and I saw this is the way they were doing it, I thought, wow, this is really bad. I don't want to do it that way, So with another devotee, he gave a very nice idea, and we started to do the system, which was to have the children, instead of chanting the way we do, they were chanting the kind of rhythmic way, and the children loved to do it in that way, in this rhythmic way. And the change I did, that instead of giving them the big beads, I had little smaller beads for them, with only the quarter of a round or half of a round. So when they would chant, they would feel that they were chanting many rounds, because that's what is difficult for children. By the end, they have done one round, took them 1 hour, they're exhausted, and it's only one. Well, when they see that they can do so many, they're very excited, and they compete with who is going to do more rounds. So it was working very good. But some of the devotees, they were getting disturbed because we were doing this kind of funny way of chanting. And sometimes we would chant in the temple room. So we would have all the children chanting in this rhythmic way, and the others were disturbed, and they said, why do you make them chant like that? This is not authentic, this is not bona fide, and I was receiving criticism. But I kept on anyway, because what's important is that they chant, we have to find ways so that they're happy chanting. So when I brought all the children like that to see Prabhupada, then Prabhupada told them to chant japa. So they started to chant in this way, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. That's the way they used to do it. So they started to chant like that, and they chanted with really great enthusiasm, the way they used to do it when we chant together in the ashram. And Prabhupada loved it. He loved it so much that he had them chant and go on chanting like that, and then he had them stand up, and they were standing up and dancing at the same time, chanting in that way, their japa. So, which proves that Prabhupada is very much appreciative of innovations, as long as it's successful, So I was very glad that Prabhupada did that, because I received criticism, and here I had Prabhupada was completely accepting this, the way I was doing it.
The day went by and Prabhupada left next morning, and so I went in, and there was, he had left me some twigs. There was something on the dresser that I had that he had left, some cashew and some pistachio nuts. And Nanda Kumar called me over and says he had pathis this morning. And here, there's some for you, I left. And then he told me about bread. They had given Prabhupada some, at that time, what we thought it was very good bread. It was Oro Wheat Company had come out with the first whole wheat bread, and somebody fed it to Prabhupada, and he ate it. But Nanda Kumar says, he woke up and he says, please don't ever give me bread again like that. He says, actually, grains that are cooked, he says, they gave me nightmares. And he says, actually, when somebody cooks grain or the food is cooked by all their vibrations, all their karma goes into this food. So it's very important that you make your own, that devotees should make their. He encouraged us to make bread and to feed him that.
We went with Srila Prabhupada. It was Gorsinder and myself and Govinda Dasi and Mahapurush. We drove Srila Prabhupada into town. We borrowed Vamana Dev's old station wagon and drove Srila Prabhupada into town. And we got to the radio station. It was supposed to be a 1-hour interview on the biggest station in Honolulu at the time. And we got there, and Gorsinder said, all right, you go with Srila Prabhupada and Govinda Dasi into the radio, do the program with Srila Prabhupada. Mahapurush and I, we have to go and get some boga and different things. So there I was with Srila Prabhupada and Govinda Dasi. We went into the radio station, and went in, Srila Prabhupada was being interviewed, and Govinda Dasi and I were sitting, Srila Prabhupada would be sitting in the chair, and we were sitting at his lotus feet. And about 3/4 of the way through, the radio personality asked Srila Prabhupada, could you please chant so our listeners could hear this Hare Krishna mantra? So we thought that Srila Prabhupada was going to chant and we were going to listen. And he starts chanting and we didn't respond. And he looks down at us and he says, chant? So it was, once again, it was so intimate. Srila Prabhupada is chanting, Govinda Dasi and I are responding. The whole intimacy of every day's activities, who would want to leave? You know, he had that special quality, that loving, he was giving that love that we had never found anywhere else, and which, you know, keeps us going to this very day.
I was quite fortunate as well because one morning everybody was in the temple room waiting for Prabhupada, and I was just waiting outside, and I realized I was the only one outside, and I just grabbed a flower garland and some sandalwood pulp, just ran over to Prabhupada's room, and then just as he was coming out the door, he was Hari Sorry, he was bending down, putting Prabhupada's slippers on for him. He just sort of walked into the slippers. Hari Sorry just put them in a certain way, and he just walked into them and carry on walking. And I was standing right in front of him, and I just stood there with this garland, and Prabhupada just stopped and he just looked, and we were just like this close to each other. And it just seemed to me like ages. I just stood there, frozen, and just we were looking into each other's eyes, and the depths of Prabhupada's eyes. That was like the first time that I'd seen Prabhupada. The first time that came back to me at that time. It was such a depth, but it was warmth. I mean, his eyes were moist, and the depth, it was so great that I just thought I was looking into another world. I mean, when I was looking into his eyes, I was just thinking, this is amazing, you know. I mean, and then I just dropped the garland on Prabhupada's head and took the sandalwood pulp and put it on his forehead, and then I just fell down on the floor and paid obeisances. But that feeling, I mean, to this day, you know, I just feel, it was so powerful because Prabhupada was just emanating this love, feeling of love, and you know, it was so nice, you know.
I could say that what struck me the most with Prabhupada was his intelligence, how he was able to, and this is a sign of intelligence, how intelligent he was, how he was able to, at the same time, be completely transcendental and completely down to earth. Because that's one of the things which is a big problem with devotees. Most of them, at the time, they're so transcendental that they're completely out of touch with reality and they do all kind of nonsense, you know, and that hurts a lot of the movement. And what struck me the most with Prabhupada is that he was able to be at the same time in Krishna Loka, you know, having a relationship with Krishna, at the same time, so practical, you know, so down to earth, you know, so concerned with all the specifics, all the details, you know, of daily life, and how he trained these first devotees in that way, you know. And for me, this is the highest intelligence of Prabhupada, and that's why I think that you cannot understand Krishna consciousness only from reading his books. The only way you can understand is from reading his books and understanding his personal life, his personal example, you know, how he lived the philosophy. If you do that, if you have both together, then you can really understand how to practice Krishna consciousness. And very often the problems we have is that people, they try to live Krishna consciousness only according to the books, but not according to Prabhupada's personal example, which we know now through all the books written by all the different devotees who talk about Prabhupada, or, you know, all the memories of all the devotees about Prabhupada. And for me, many of the things that I have done in Krishna consciousness were based on some instruction he gave just by talking with devotees, you know, in a very casual way, you know. So, I mean, that's one of the things that particularly struck me on this completely spiritual intelligence. I mean, maybe because I'm attracted to intellectual things, but you know what Prabhupada for me is the greatest intellectual of the planet. Such an intelligent person, and I'm very much attracted to that.
Krishna Kirtana Gana Natana Pano Premamritam Manidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyau Priyakarau